Excellent!
Ah yes, the Professional Video Monitor. Also known as a PVM, these are very sought after by retro gaming enthusiasts because of their fantastic picture quality when displaying RGB video, which is something that most retro game consoles can display natively. Personally, I've always dreamed about owning a 20-inch Sony PVM in my setup. Unfortunately, that dream is probably never going to happen. A lot of time has passed in the evolution of display technology to the point that broadcasting studios, where you'd normally find these displays, have long since been decommissioned. So basically, a lot of the PVMs that are left to roam this earth are either junked or in the hands of collectors like you and I. And let's say they're not going to be as willing to give them away for such a cheap price. Luckily, I've come up with a couple suggestions that you guys can use to get the same PVM experience, but without the struggles of finding a working PVM and actually having to pay for it, because holy shit, how are you guys able to afford this stuff? Links to buy most items featured in this video will be in the description below. So the first solution I have are these component cables by HD Retrovision. Now they make these cables for both the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. And they're pretty simple to use. You just plug them into your system and then you plug it into your CRT display that has component inputs. It's as simple as that. They also make adapters so you can use them for other systems as well, such as the PlayStation 1 and Sega Saturn. The overall picture quality is super crisp. I'm gonna have to do some direct capture for this one since it's kinda hard to record CRT displays, but you can see how crystal clear it is compared to composite video. As for the cons I have with these cables, for one, you can only use this cable with a CRT TV that has component inputs. I mean, duh, but that still kinda gives you a small group of CRTs that you can use. And even then, you might bump into some compatibility issues if your TV can't display 240p through component. Another issue I have with these cables are the price, where each cable costs $65. And along with that, the adapters that you can buy to make it compatible with PlayStation 1 and Sega Saturn systems are $18 each, which, believe me, is super expensive. But I guess the benefits of getting these cables are that you can easily integrate them in any setup that already has component inputs, such as an old home theater setup, an Extron Crosspoint, or just your bog standard component switchers. Another thing to note about these cables is that if you were to use the Super Nintendo cables with a Super Nintendo Junior or a Nintendo 64, you're going to have to modify your systems as they don't have onboard RGB video. Now, I was kind of gung-ho about using these cables with some systems, but I ran into an issue very quickly when I found out that they don't make adapters for every retro system. For one, the Sega Genesis Model 1 adapter that they make doesn't work with other systems that use a similar connector. This includes systems such as the Neo Geo AES, and for my case, the PC Engine Duo R, which I did make a video on, by the way, if you want to check that out. In order for me to actually tap into the RGB signal, I had to use the SCARC cable that was bundled with the system. Now, for those who don't know, which I want to say is everybody outside of Europe, and people that don't watch My Life in Gaming, SCART is a video input type, which is basically kind of like HDMI, where all the audio and video stuff is crammed into one cable. What makes them appealing for retro video games is that they can carry RGB video. Unfortunately, SCART didn't really take off in North America, which means seeing a North American TV with a SCART input is a very rare sight. So what do you do when you have a weird cable that doesn't plug into anything that you already own? Well, you buy an adapter, which is what I have right here. This adapter is made by Wakaba Video, and he also makes adapters that convert SCART into other signals such as S-Video or composite if you're a fucking monster. Operating this device is very simple. You plug in your SCART connector to the front of the device, and on the back it spits out a component signal that you plug into your TV. The quality of the signal is still very high because the converter is powered by USB. I'm very glad that it uses a USB-C connector because micro USB is the work of the devil. Unfortunately, this device can't display any signals that are at 480p, including the Dreamcast. It's not that bad considering that a lot of the CRT TVs that I own don't even support 480p natively, so I could just chalk it up to that. The only other nitpick I have with this device is that it doesn't have any rubber feet on the bottom. So when you're constantly changing cables if you don't have a switcher, the device just kind of slides everywhere. That can be easily remedied though. All you really have to do is buy one of those furniture bumpers and sticking them on the corners of the device. And that's pretty much it. This device does its job and it does it pretty well. It converts SCART to component, and if you have a CRT with component inputs, it gives you a fantastic picture. And there's not much else I can really say about it, which isn't inherently a bad thing. Next up is another solution that might be a little more tricky to come by, and that is a VGA CRT monitor. These puppies were found in offices, school computer labs, or the family computer setup from the mid-90s to early 2000s. I mostly recommend these monitors for a couple reasons. You can adjust the geometry if you bump into any issues with distortion, and there's a degauss tool built into most monitors. Degaussing a monitor is very important. It gets rid of unwanted effects that are caused by a magnetic field. Along with that, VGA monitors can support signals up to 480p, meaning you can play systems up to the 6th generation. This includes the GameCube, original Xbox, Dreamcast, and in some cases the PS2. Unfortunately, getting game systems to work on a VGA monitor takes a little bit of work. Unless you have an original Xbox or Dreamcast, you can't just plug your system straight into the monitor, which unfortunately means you're going to have to buy an upscaler. Now, depending on the upscaler you do end up with, you might get access to a bunch of other features. These include various input types, but more importantly, scanlines and aperture grills to get a more authentic PVM experience. All of that comes with a cost, however. I was able to pull off these effects using a RetroTink 5X, which is a $325 upscaler. Cheaper upscaler options do exist, such as the OSSC and the GBS control. However, those require more work to get up and running. It's pretty much a balancing act of deciding which upscaler has all the features you need, and if it fits in your budget. One last thing to note if you are going through with the VGA monitor route is that a lot of them don't come with built-in speakers, meaning that you'll have to get creative on figuring out a way to get audio from your systems. These can range from using the built-in headphone jack on some systems like the original Sega Genesis, or on upscalers such as the aforementioned OSSC and GBS control. So at the cost of having the ease of access to adjust things like geometry, you do have to jump through a lot of hurdles if you want to display consoles that don't output through VGA, and to get audio. I will say, you could also just plug the VGA monitor into your computer and play games through that, whether it be original retro-style titles or emulation. I don't judge here. However, if you already own a CRT TV, you might not have to chuck it for something better. If you already have a TV that displays the channel numbers and volume on the screen itself, you may have an RGB-ready display. By giving the chip responsible for displaying these graphics, known as the Jungle Chip Constant Power, and its own set of inputs, you can inject RGB video into almost any display. And the end result is something that's completely underestimated. In person, it's a night and day difference. It's honestly something that I can't really record properly. These little macro shots I've taken between composite video and RGB can only go so far. What I like about the RGB TV route is that it gives you access to a whole bunch of different TV sizes. According to the CRT database, the largest TV on there is 32 inches, which is the Sony KV35S66. So if you can get fantastic RGB video with pretty much any tube TV made after the late 90s, why haven't more people been doing it? Well, there's a couple good reasons. For one, documentation on a lot of these tube TVs are scarce. And even if you can find the schematics for your TV, there's a good chance that the jungle chip inside hasn't been documented either. If you're curious as to see which CRTs are compatible with this mod, I'll leave a link to a list on the CRT database in the description below. And I'm kind of glancing over this important part, but you could die while working in one of these things. Cathode tubes can carry a wicked amount of voltage, and if you were to poke the wrong part while working in a tube TV, you're going to be in for a shock. Quite literally. So if you're completely terrified of the idea of working in one of these things, and you could, die, finding somebody that can work on these TVs can be pretty tricky. Luckily, I know somebody within the New England area that can do just that. He goes by Tube Gaming on YouTube, but also Puzzleheaded Sign 89 on Reddit. He's very knowledgeable about this type of stuff, and his Reddit page proves it. On his page, you can see him go through the whole modding process, where he installs RGB lines, picture calibration, he actually goes the extra mile to replace any leaking capacitors, and cleans the whole chassis, which I definitely appreciate. He also has a very reasonable turnaround time, which is impressive considering how time-consuming and careful you have to be while modding these sets. I've been very impressed with this TV. Even though the set I chose is pretty small at around 13 inches, it is a complete game changer. And now I'm on the hunt for a larger CRT TV to get that RGB modded. This rabbit hole never ends, does it? Hey there, thanks for hanging out and watching my video. If you guys want to see more, feel free to subscribe. If you want to see updates on the channel, or whatever I feel like rambling about, feel free to visit my social media pages. If you have a question about anything I mentioned in this video, feel free to let me know in the comment section down below. Anyways, I'm Nate, and I'll see you guys in the next video.